Volvo XC90 T8 Recharge with the inscription package. Today we're going to find out if it's worth the $80,000 price tag. Starting off with the looks of the XC90, it's subtle and it's gorgeous. The lines on it are simple, elegant, and just attractive. Me and my wife both agree that this vehicle is gorgeous looking. Inside and out, we'll get into the interior a little bit. On the exterior, this thing has the 21-inch optional wheels. Well, actually there are several 21-inch wheel options for this XC90. They even have an option for a 22-inch wheel, and I don't really recommend going that big for a lot of reasons. But the exterior, you're either gonna really like it or it's just gonna be kind of blah to you. But for me, I think it's an amazing looking vehicle, and it's been out really since 2015. Volvo knows how to design gorgeous looking cars. The XC90, their largest vehicle, is no exception. Now, getting into the interior, we have wool seats. There are no ventilated seats with these thick wool-like gorgeous seats. Now, they're beautiful, and you're gonna have to choose whether you want beautiful and aesthetics over functionality, because not only do you not get ventilated seats, but these, since they're a wool blend, they're kind of scratchy, but they are comfortable. They have good support in the turns. It's just that I would be getting the Napa leather with the perforation and the ventilation every single time over these really good looking wool seats. Now, if you're familiar with the infotainment in Volvos, well, it's pretty much the same here. To the left is going to be all your vehicle options and safety setup, and then the middle screen is your standard screen, and then you can switch out the primary standard screen with other widgets and applications through this screen. So it's kind of hard to get used to, but it is pretty simple once it gets going. Now, I actually had an issue with the infotainment and the vehicle as a whole. It was sitting out in the sun. You guys know I live in South Florida now, and it was really, really hot, and the screen was extraordinarily hot to the touch, and it reset twice after sitting in the sun for about an hour. And when the system rebooted, not only did I not have my instrument cluster where it had speedometer and things like that, the AC actually turned off when that happened. So it reset itself twice back to back, and then I haven't had any issues since. So, but the trim is nice. This ash wood all over the car is really, really gorgeous. Now, you have Bowers & Wilkins several places all over the vehicle. That is the upgraded sound system, which cost $3,200. And in my listening to it, to me, it's not $3,200 worth of sound system, but I must say it's probably the best looking sound system I've ever seen, with the little circular speaker sitting on the middle of the dash. Like, the Swedish people really know how to make clean and gorgeous, aesthetically pleasing vehicles inside and out, and that Bowers & Wilkins looks really good in here. I would probably, if I were to get it, I would get it more for the looks than I would for the actual sound. And speaking of another touch to the aesthetic end, the crystal shifter is locally sourced from a small Swedish town that's been making crystal since the 1700s. So I love that unique local aspect, and I've seen the Japanese and the Koreans do it, but not to this extent and not to the charm that this Volvo incorporates the amount of Swedish styles, heritage, etc. inside this Volvo vehicle. Now, it has a heads-up display. I turn it off, and the reason is that it will flash the speed limit if you're going over the speed limit, and I just can't deal with that, so I just turned it off entirely. I don't want a strobe light going off in my line of sight. Now, in terms of the interior, other than the aesthetics, it is a very, very cramped interior, especially for the rear passengers. Like, I haven't been in very many three-row crossovers that are this unaccommodating. The Mazda CX-9 is pretty close, but I feel like that has even more third row space, but less headroom than this. This has more headroom in that third row compared to that CX-9. But in terms of leg room back there, it is unusable for anyone over probably 5 feet. And just getting my kids in and out of this vehicle, I have 4 little ones. this vehicle is not for families with more than 2 kids, I would say, which is kind of a head scratcher because it's 3 rows of seats. You know, the seats do fold down for a lot of cargo capacity, but if you have more than 2 kids, you're going to have to make some compromises. Like 4 kids in here, putting in a stroller, never going to happen. It's just not that practical for a larger and young family like mine. So it's unfortunate that this vehicle was so difficult for my family to get the kids in and out. And there's no USBs in that 3rd row, even though they're really nice placed vents to keep them cool back there, which, by the way, the AC in this is some of the best AC with the vents and just how responsive it is in cooling this massive vehicle down. Great AC system. But in the 3rd row, great vents, but there are no USBs in that 3rd row for the passengers. So I have to run long cables from the USB-Cs here in the 2nd row all the way to that 3rd row. So going around the roundabout here, it's time to talk about performance, the engine, the powertrain, and how this vehicle handles. And let's talk about the engine first. This is a T8. That means it is a plug-in hybrid. And there's an electric motor in the back, which accounts for 87 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. It is, on paper, not that much, but I've been driving this vehicle the majority around town in fully electric mode. I'm in full electric right now. But when you're not in full electric mode and you're in more of the hybrid mode, you have a turbocharged and supercharged 2-liter 4-cylinder in the front with over 310 horsepower and almost 300 pound-feet of torque. And when you push this vehicle, it is really fast. So I'm going to come to a stop here, which, by the way, these brakes are out of this world in terms of brake feel. I'd give it an A+. Like, you guys know I'm really picky about how brake pedals feel and how the linearity is very important. But yes, brakes are A++, but let's get into the performance. Let's see what this combined 400 horsepower and over 470 pound-feet of torque is capable of. 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, it's fast. So you have that initial torque from the rear wheels pushing you forward, but it takes a while for this Aishin 8-speed Japanese source transmission to kick down a couple cogs, and it actually performs very similarly on how this 8-speed automatic handles in the Lexus RX. It's the same transmission. It's an 8-speed Aishin. It's the exact same transmission. It's been on the RX since 2013 and the F Sport guys. So I love the fact that it has a super reliable 8-speed Japanese-built Aishin transmission, and that just adds to the bonus points, the brownie points for the vehicle. The horsepower and the acceleration is phenomenal in this vehicle, and passing people on the interstate, we drove up to Fort Myers where my in-laws live. This vehicle on the interstate was very quiet, great passing power, and it just effortlessly accelerates to 80 miles an hour very quietly. And this vehicle is extraordinarily quiet. Especially from the powertrain. When I push it, it doesn't ever sound like the engine's trying that hard, which you know it is because it's a little 2-liter pumping out 313 horsepower or so. But it's always quiet. The transmission is very smooth. It's not the most responsive, but when you're driving in full electric mode, which I'm not right now, since I gunned it a second ago, it's running on gasoline right now. It is actually almost entirely as quiet as if you were running on the full electric mode. So, and even the smoothness, you don't feel the vibration of the engine unless you really push it. So it's just a very, very luxurious driving vehicle and handling vehicle as well. It's very stiff around the corners, and that leads me to the next part, which is how does it ride and how does it handle the bumps? Well, if you don't have any bumps, it's very smooth, of course. It does have air ride and how this one is equipped. Unfortunately, it does not have a well-damped suspension. And I was really surprised that this had air ride because if you hit imperfect pavement, it does not sort it out very well at all. And maybe that's due to the 21-inch wheels. And so definitely don't get the 22-inch wheels because I live in an area with perfect roads, and even this setup is too stiff for my liking for this sort of vehicle. It just doesn't handle imperfect road situations as well as it should, in my opinion. A couple odds and ends to finish up this review before I give you my final thoughts. I've been getting over 31 miles per gallon. That includes all the time I've been driving in electric only mode, which is probably less than half the time since I made a long trip to Fort Myers and back in this vehicle. But I've been getting about 20 miles of pure electric driving. It's rated at 18, but I take it pretty easy in this vehicle. And you know, for 87 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque, on paper it doesn't sound like much, but it is absolutely enough to keep this vehicle up with traffic at stoplights and in town. Has no issues keeping up with traffic, and that kind of surprised me because on paper I'm like, I don't know how this heavy vehicle is going to be able to propel itself with that meager amount of horsepower and torque, but it gets the job done and it's pretty satisfying overall. Now, is 20 miles of range going to be enough for the average person? Probably not. It's great for doing errands, going to the grocery store and back. We went to Target and back, and also a gelato shop for the 4th of July. It was a beautiful 4th of July day in this vehicle. And we were able to do it in full electric. We didn't have to recharge or go back to the gasoline engine at any point in time during our Target trip and our gelato trip. So that was really, really satisfying. The problem is when we take it on a little bit longer trips across town or out of town, you just aren't able to stretch that full electric range as long as, if it had 30, 40 miles of electric range, man, this vehicle would be a complete beast. Oh yeah, and there's a button here that opens the glove box. The problem is I don't see that there's a manual override for it. And frustrating for me is that there's no way to get to the 360 camera or camera button without you pressing or pushing the shifter in reverse and then pressing 360 camera. I would much rather have this button, this glove box opener button, swapped out with a camera button, which you would think Volvo would give that to you since they're so safety focused, but unfortunately you don't have a 360 camera or just a camera button in here. So that frustrates me a little bit, even though this camera system is really, really good. You just don't have easy access to it in my workings with the vehicle. So final thoughts on my first Volvo review on the channel. Exceeded my expectations in most ways, with a few caveats, with some letdowns in there as well. And let's start with the letdowns. To me, this is a larger vehicle, but the interior is just so cramped for a family of my size. Now, if you have 2 kids or less and you like the XC90, yeah, go for it. It's going to meet your expectations and meet your needs more than likely. Just for my size of family, even though it has 3 rows, it's way too cramped and it's really difficult to get the kids in and out, like vastly more difficult than just about any other 3-row SUV I've tested. And the other big downfall of this vehicle for me is the ride quality. Like I said, most of the time it's pretty good, but when you hit imperfect pavement, it just feels like it upsets the balance of the vehicle and it's just not that enjoyable. If I were driving this back in Nebraska, I would probably be holding onto the steering wheel for dear life, feeling bad for the vehicle, because it just doesn't feel, as I go over this crosswalk, to me, it isn't as luxurious feeling as it should be. The rest of the vehicle screams luxury and sophistication and great aesthetics that outpaces nearly everything else in the price point. There's nothing quite like the refined and just reserved styling of these Volvo vehicles, which I find extreme beauty in, inside and out. I mean, these wool seats are just a knockout, but they're not the right seat for this warm climate down here with no ventilation, and just they're like wearing a sweater and they're scratchy. But man, the sophistication of this powertrain is phenomenal. The amount of power you get at all times is very satisfying. The fact that this has essentially a Lexus transmission in it is also kind of peace of mind if you plan on owning this vehicle for a long time. Like I said, driving this in pure electric mode should be easily done for the majority of you. And like I didn't mention this, one last thing, it took me about 3.5 hours or so to recharge from empty to full with this 11.6 kilowatt hour battery. So it takes a bit on a typical 120 volt, but to be honest, you just plug it in overnight or between your trips and you'll have your charge back. So overall, XC90 recharge T8 400 horsepower, 20 miles of electric range on it. Is it worth $80K? It really depends on what you like, because the styling and the aesthetics alone, and I feel like the fit and finish and the materials in here are absolutely worth $80K. But the suspension to me and the cramped interiors are one of those things that are almost non-negotiable to me. So it's tough for me in my situation, but definitely go out and try out the XC90 if you're interested in it. The plug-in hybrid is a lot of fun. It's very rewarding to drive. I'm getting now over 32 miles per gallon in it combined. And guys, I'm gonna end it there. Definitely smash the like button if you enjoyed my review on this Volvo XC90 Recharge. More Volvo reviews coming in the future as I add them slowly into the line of work on the channel. Guys, I'll catch you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace out.